I've just had a quick discussion. I'm going to hand over to Bruce, but he's going to sort of take an action arising out of those questions and develop a sort of an integrated response to all of the questions that have been asked. And but we'll also, I'm going to open it up to questions after Bruce has given a bit of a intro to where we are, and I know that we have someone additional online who won't be recognisable to any of you, which is Mike Kerr, who's here from Anderson Lloyd. So he's the external legal advisor for the council. So just welcome to the meeting, Mike. I hope that we won't need your intervention, but you're here to be able to respond to questions if required. So I'll hand over to you, Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you. And look, this is the first time you've seen me on this topic. I know you've discussed it many times before, but generally not. The Chief Executive has asked that because it's a more of a property matter rather than the project matter that you've seen before, that I come into this one and bring it all together. I'm very much the ringmaster today, and I've got a supporting crew who have a lot of the answers to questions that are in front of you. I do feel I've been given a hospital pass because the matter in front of you is one where there is a diversity of views, and all valuable and all worthy of consideration. And this matter brings to you questions of differing values and how we make those decisions between differing values. Bring together matters of lifestyle versus life stage, and how that impacts on people's consumption of cultural goods. It brings together matters of commercial competition and how we deal with that in balancing our response to developing the city. I'm not going to dwell too long on talking up front. I think your questions are better. So I'm going to, subject to the Mayor's agreement, move straight to questions. But there'll be a variety of people answering those questions throughout this afternoon's session.
Thank you. All right. So I've got Jimmy, Mike and Sarah.
Microphone, Leanne.
Sorry. I've got Jimmy, Mike and Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Bruce, may I ask you first question? The Catholic Diocese Joe April, she mentioned even during the consultation, our document is not, the put on the public in the early stage. Even some of the consultation document, even she received yesterday or before. Am I right? That's true or not?
No. That's a misunderstanding, Jimmy.
Misunderstanding.
What she said was that she didn't get the plans in relation to the Wilson car park proposal, which were only lodged by way of resource consent this week. So they were sent to her once they were received. What she was asking was in relation to an earlier documentation, which was the subject to her Lagoima request, which had that redacted. So perhaps, Bruce, can I put that question to you?
Yep, and as I said, I'll be ringmaster. So I believe that Sean Rainey and also our legal team, Viv, online. So can I hand that matter to you to answer, Sean?
Certainly. Hello all, my name's Sean Rainey. I'm the Manager of Official Information at the Council. Just to give you a little bit of background, I dealt with the Lagoima request on the PAP car park in November and December last year. So initially we received, just to give you a little bit of background, a request for material that we held for the intended future use of the site. Under urgency, we responded to that, providing Council's requirements for the development, as per the public RFP and the council proof of concept scheme plans at that time. Following this, there was a further request for any drawings or of the proposed buildings, including more detailed elevations, locations of entry and exit. We then consulted with the then applicant and actually identified, given the stage of the project, there was actually a commercial sensitivity, and given this was subject to ongoing negotiations, we withheld this information under the Legoima. Now, following this, we then received the consent application. I think it was late on the 3rd of March, which actually made a lot of this information public. And at that point, we were able to release this information to the requester.
Okay,
Thank you.
Mayor, may I second question?
Yes.
Just the second one. Second question is, based on the Christchurch central recovery plan, when the Crown, to give this piece of land to the council, whether they particular designated or specify this purpose for the performing arts precinct, the car park, or just for the performing arts, the precinct, the purpose?
So that goes to the designation allows for ancillary uses for the performing arts precinct, so we believe that the application is an ancillary purpose, and the use of it for car parking or parking is an ancillary purpose. But my understanding, and I believe John Higgins is online, my understanding is that the resource consent application, the application here is not relying on the designation, but is separately going through the resource consent process. Perhaps John can comment on that.
Yes, sorry, I'm just trying to get my camera ready. So, yes, the site is designated for the performing arts precinct and ancillary activities as well. We haven't quite looked at the application yet, so it's still in the early stages. So we haven't formed a view about what if a car park is ancillary or not. So we still need to work through that. They've lodged it as a resource consent rather than a outline plan, which is under the designation. So they don't need to be the requiring authority to lodge a resource consent. So that's where we're at this stage, unless you got any more questions about that.
Okay, thank you. That's my question. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Mike, Sarah, Sam, Jake, and Pauline.
Thank you. I just wondered, do we know what the optimal number of car parks are required for this area of the CBD?
We do, and I'll bring Tim Cheeseborough to the table.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, we do. And in fact, some of those figures were shared with the market through the request to market that went out November before last. So they're broken down into the amount of parking we expect to be needed by the Performing Arts Precinct itself. But supplementary to that, we've got additional figures for Tapai, the balance of precinct for Tapai, and then separately the library and the town hall. So what I would say in relation to the level of parking demand needed to service the Performing Arts Precinct, that if you look simply at the theatre and performance venues within the precinct, including the Crown Plaza, and that in some of the early work that did include a 400 space separate black box theatre venue, which is not registered as happening at the present time. But if you actually looked at the analysis we've received around that, is in the evenings, which is of course when the peak parking demand would exist. The demand from those PAP venues alone could come to around north of 900 spaces needed for the PAP venues alone. Then if you add in Taronga, Te Pai, to some degree the town hall north of the river, then ultimately you can get up north of 2,000 spaces in total serving those venues. Now, of course, it's important to say, and that's analysed in this paper, is that it's unlikely that all of those venues would have performances going on at the same time. But nevertheless, if you come back to that basic need of what does the Performing Arts Precinct alone need, then it is reasonable to assume that you may get north of 900 spaces being needed there. And of course, the parking building we're looking at here is for 380 spaces. So there is only a proportion of the calculated demand for the arts precinct in toto.
And so what's the current number of available car parks within that area, then that walkable area of?
I have the numbers. I've got the numbers with me, but we've the off-street spaces in permanent parking buildings within about an 8-minute walk. So those are mostly south of Cathedral Square. So that's Hereford Street, Litchfield Street, and so on. That's around 2,700 spaces in purpose-built parking buildings that have been delivered in accordance with the parking plan. The majority of spaces Cathedral Precinct and North, which of course is what we've been focusing on here for the last few years, are a mixture of at-grade temporary parking. And we've done some analysis in recent days about how many at-grade temporary parks there might be in, say, a 500 metre or so radius of the Arts Precinct. And the numbers go up and down around the consenting there, but we're somewhere in the region of 1,000 to 1,300 spaces delivered by temporary at-grade consents in that area. And of course, obviously, in terms of looking to the future here, we're not including the continuation of those temporary spaces in any of our calculations.
And Councillor Davidson, that information has all been supplied to me. I'm just be working over tomorrow and the weekend to put that into a memo for councillors in an easily digestible way.
Oh, no, that's great. Thanks, Bruce. Can we also include the potential number of car parks that would be in the car parking building behind Ridges?
The Noah's one?
Yes, again, that's, as the report indicates, that's somewhat out of our control. But our understanding was that building used to have around 330 spaces. Not all of those were publicly available, of course, because a number were ancillary to the hotel. So if the hotel were to be repaired and reopened, I think our estimate is it may offer in the region of 250 publicly available parking spaces.
And I assume, though, if someone was going to look at repairing that car parking building to operate it for a business, they'd actually be looking at whether there's too many car parks in the area or not. So potentially us building another one will actually go over the optimal level and therefore make it uneconomic to repair that one behind Noah's.
So when we went to market around this, and we shared again this with the marketplace, we indicated that looking all of these numbers and potential demands, which of course is very difficult to accurately calculate for this type of venue because it's changing all the time. But our view at the time was, and our advice at the time was, that there was probably a reasonable marketplace for somewhere around upper 600s, around 700 spaces placed north of Cathedral Square. Now, within the proposal before council at the moment, that is for 380 spaces. So this building alone does not meet what we believe to be the calculated supply need for that general area north of Cathedral Square. So obviously that gap could be made up by a number of options beyond what's before council today.
Yeah, it sort of feels like a car parking building in the PAT plus a car parking building in the Catholic diocese would actually go past that, optimum number for car parking buildings north of Cathedral Square. Yeah, I look forward to seeing all the numbers. Thank you.
Right, well, Sam, it's your lucky day today. Sarah's agreed that I can call you first.
Thanks, Sarah and Leanne. Just two quick ones there. Sorry, I've got to go. But two things. In relation to Joe's deputation of Catholic Diocese, there were two things that cropped up that I just need someone to clarify. The first one was the potential risk around the split of the proceeds with the Crown if we don't, I guess if the intent, because of it not being just for the precinct, it occurs. Can someone talk through if there's any risk around if we were to proceed with the sale, whether we can be caught with a 50-50 sort of approach, or just based on Joe's
That's
comments?
the definition of ancillary purposes. So
So we don't believe there is a risk, but Luke can talk more to that.
Yeah, hi Sam, Luke Reese Thomas here. We've already had initial discussions with the Crown around that encumbrance and that requirement for a split of the proceeds. The Crown is not expecting any proceeds from the sale. The use of the land fits within the encumbrance definition, which specifically includes car parking, which was always the anticipated use.
So the Crown's agreed that.
Yep.
Sam? So do we have that confirmed as such?
They've agreed to remove the encumbrance.
Yeah, we'll put that in writing for you.
Cool. Okay, thanks, Luke. And the other one is just around the consistency in terms of the RFP that went out, and then the proposal was such that's come back in, or that came in. Can we? I know it's probably we're a step further down the line than we were over this, but can someone just clarify if there's any risks around the intent of the RFP as opposed to what's actually gone through, sort of contingent on the sale? Does that kind of make sense?
So, I take it you're referring to the comment about the resource consent plans and the height compared to what's in the RFP. We need, given that the resource consent plans only arrived on Friday, haven't yet done that analysis, but that will be done. But one additional, I suppose, control assurance that's in place is that we, in the sale and purchase agreement, have a design approval clause. That means we need to approve the design as well. So that's separate to the resource consent process. So we would need to do that exercise as well. So that allows for that protection and consideration of that the design meets all of our needs, including that height on Gloucester Street.
Okay, thanks. And sorry, really quick last one to Sean Rainey, and it was around the Ombudsman and that information. And you mentioned that we had the 3rd of March is when we were in a position to actually release it. So did we release all that information on the 3rd of March?
No, we released the information on the 9th as a package with the, once we'd finished consulting with the applicant as well. There was additional information outside of the application, which we also provided.
Okay, thanks. Hey, thanks, Leanne. I'll pad my share.
Yep. Okay, thank you. So I've got Sarah, Jake, and Pauline.
Thanks so much, Alison. The report makes the point that this is a decision on the sale of the land, not whether a car parking building or not. And so sort of implies that some of the feedback isn't as useful as others. But I'm just wondering, I don't recall us consulting on the building of a car park on the site at all. And I'm wondering if that means that this is kind of a proxy for that consultation as well. Did we consult at all on the building of the car park on the site?
I'm still working through each of the various consultations that are there, because it has been addressed through a number of things at different times. I think it's probably fair to say, with what I've got to, that we have not specifically consulted and said we want to build a car park on the site, but it has been brought up and addressed in a number of other consultation mechanisms. And the one that springs most to mind is the Global Settlement Agreement the consultation on that specifically refers to a car park on the site. I've got to complete that analysis to make sure that I've covered that in all bases, and I'll provide that information to councillors before the meeting continues on next Tuesday.
Okay, thanks. And I didn't get to ask the Steve of the court deputation if you could find out for the deliberations how many car parks there actually were at the 8th grade car park that used to service the old court theatre at the Arts Centre, the old 8th grade one where Ravenscar is.
Oh, we can tell.
Yeah, we can.
We've got that information. We don't need to ask them. Yeah, because when we agreed to sell the land, we had all of that information.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no. I was saying that. Sorry, I was saying that I didn't get to ask him, but you guys will know. So if we could find out from you, that would be and how far that car parking was from the entrance to the old court theatre, because my pick is it's at least 100 metres when I used to park there.
Literally directly over the road.
Over the road from the Arts Centre, but the court theatre was down a bit. And so the other in the report, it talks about the testing, sort of the traffic testing shows that the network could cope with a second car park in the area, as opposed to the network needs a second car park in the area when it talks about the car parking. And I'm just wondering, it seems like quite a big difference.
All right, I'll hand to Tim to talk through that.
So we've tested the network in the area with this car park building added onto Gloucester Street. We've also tested it with potential possible changes to the traffic arrangements in and around Cathedral Square, as well as potentially Gloucester Street itself, around the works to upgrade Gloucester Street there. And we've also tested it were there to be an additional parking building also north of Armagh Street, which you've heard referred to this afternoon as part of the potential diocese development there. So our analyses around that indicate to us that the network should be able to cope reasonably well with both the parking building before council now, but also were there to be an additional secondary building north of Gloucester Street, then the network could cope with that as well. So in other words, it's not an either or in terms of the traffic effects on the network.
Okay. And with the plans for the Catholic diocese, I don't know, we haven't seen any detail there, but if it's possible to find out actually how far from the pedestrian exit from that car parking building it is to the court theatre, that would actually be really helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. John, maybe would that information have come up through the pre-application consultation for the Catholic proposal?
There hasn't been any pre-application consultation with the Catholic proposal yet, so we're unaware of the detail.
Okay, sorry. Well, we'll try and find that information out then.
Useful information before Tuesday. Thanks. That's all from me.
Dawn, before I call the rest of the councillors on the list, did you want to comment?
Thank you, Mayor. And I think that's the other thing in terms of, so once we finish the member questions, I'm pulling my team back together again to make sure we have landed all the different varying things that have come out this afternoon, because I'm really clear that we need to be able to give you the specific objective advice and taking the emotion out of it all, because it is obviously conflicting priorities. The other question, because it has just been said, there's been no pre-application discussions with the local authority around the diocese, is what I've just heard. Yep. Yet in the presentation is saying that the application the resource consent will be coming in shortly. Sarah, just to remind, and you may not have been there, the diocese did come in to present their overall vision and proposals in briefing not that long ago. And at the time, the diocese did say specifically it would be 4 years for them to be able to raise the funding. And we have heard 2 different timescales today in relation to the car park for the diocese. One from the lawyer and the other from Otakaro. So there is real conflicting information as well. Just wanted to get those points across.
Yeah, there's a little bit of follow-up work to do in terms of providing us with some material for next week. And I will talk to people as to whether we should really start the meeting a bit earlier on Tuesday, so that we've got time to continue the discussion prior to getting into debate. So
yes, you need as many facts as we can give you in light of what's been arisen today.
We do need to make a robust decision under the Local Government Act. That's requirement.
Yeah.
Okay. Jake, Pauline, Yanni, Tim.
2 questions from me. If this isn't to proceed on Tuesday, what do staff see as the available options open to us?
So when you say don't proceed, does that mean if the council decides not to sell?
Correct.
Yeah. So I've drafted up a potential alternative motion for that. If you just bear with me, I'll bring it up so that I've got it in front of me. I'm just waiting for some feedback from my colleagues on this before we put it through. Hold on a sec.
I've got another question for Tim while you're doing that, if you like. Tim, in an earlier staff report, there was some comment about the rates offset versus owning and operating the car park building itself versus the proceeds of the sale of the land, and it had some figures around those 2 different alternatives. Are you able to comment what the difference in quantum is?
I don't recall, but yes, those figures were in the April 21 report before council, and I think they looked at the difference in terms of the rate benefit to council from both it building the parking building itself, or alternatively the parking building being built by a third party as per the recommendation before you. I believe that the overall rate benefit to council from building itself was beneficial over the long term, over the entire term of the facility. In other words, if council built it itself, the total rate would be better. It was quite marginal, but I think what the report referred to at the time was risk around the revenue from that over that period of time, which we've heard about from some submitters this afternoon in terms of the public's changing attitudes towards car use and so on. So that needs to be borne in mind, as would what the actual capital cost to council would be around delivering this facility in terms of recent increases in construction price index and so on and so forth. So those numbers would need to be revisited now, I would imagine.
So was it, just following up on that one, was it marginal or was it twice? I think I remember the rates offset was twice.
It was a proportion of a single percentage point, and I'm afraid I do have the numbers with me, but they are in that April of.
Yeah, we'll get that and bring that point in the additional advice, Councillor.
That is appended to the report, Councillor.
Marginal in terms of how much rates go up in total. So what? Going back to you, Bruce.
Yep. So found this. And the reason why I haven't got responses because it failed to hit send. So look, some of the consequences that I'll be talking about and just bringing to your attention in that alternative resolution is that such a decision would mean you'd terminate the sale and purchase agreement with Wilson Parking. But you'd need to get additional advice from staff around options for the use of the land that was no longer required for parking. I would suspect that you would want to seek options to accelerate transport mode shift to meet the needs of users and occupiers of the performing arts precinct and other nearby facilities. and you'd want information on the consequential impacts of your decision on the roading network and the community facility operations.
All good?
And we'd need to know the risk profile in terms of legal challenge.
Yeah, that's identified in the paper. Thank you. Pauline?
Thank you. Look, I just wanted to know, could you please tell me the date that the Catholic Diocese project went public? If you can't do that today, if you could put that in a memo, that would be great.
I haven't seen it I haven't seen images of it in the public arena.
Yeah.
It was in the paper.
So, yeah, we're certainly relying on the time frame, and I'm accept that we may have been wrong in compared to the program, the project program that the diocese have. But there's an article in New Zealand Catholic magazine on the 27th of May 2021 that talked about the timeframes that we referred to in the report. But as I say, except that the project program may have a different date to what was in the public release.
But the images, when did they go public?
I'd have to check on that. These have only got block diagrams from last year.
When did they present to us?
Yeah, that was. I don't think it's gone public, so I don't know. But you can have a talk to them as well.
Yep.
Because my understanding is that we got an earlier heads up prior to the resource consent being lodged, in the same way that they said that they're talking to Ngāi Tuhuriri about the some of the cultural aspects of the precinct and the master plan. I think that's what she said. So, yep. All right, Yanni.
Cool, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, cool, okay. Thank you for the report. I've put a question into the Office of the CE around some other documents that are currently in public excluded. So obviously don't expect you to answer that now, but just to say it would be quite good to circulate those to councillors ahead of Tuesday. Can I also just ask under 5.19, I don't see any staff assessment of Wilson's as a good corporate citizen or a socially responsible company, and
was this
it just seems like
is this in the paper last year when we approved it? Are you going back to
no, this is this is back a bit before, but 5.19
page 134 today.
Oh,
yeah.
5.19 134 is the staff have considered submissions in relation to the proposed purchase of being Wilson Parking Limited, and what I couldn't see in there was any response to the concerns that people have raised, and quite a few people actually, about the suitability of them as an operator. So can you just help me understand what assessment was done at the time of procuring with Wilson's around that, and what thoughts you have in terms of, if this does proceed, how that can be mitigated to address the concerns that people have raised?
Yanni, that's a perfectly legitimate question, and we're just going to leave that question with staff so that they can take that away and work on the response to it. I'm very mindful of the fact that we have consulted on the land sale, and we are not consulting on the Wilson's thing, but as has been identified, one falls over because of a decision against the other. So, there's legitimacy to your question, but I'm not going to ask staff to answer it off the cuff now, because the earlier paper that we considered around their submission of the contract and the elements in relation to the assessment of the procurement, I don't know whether that's in public or with.
Yeah, and as I say, I wasn't involved in those papers, so I'd need to do that research to be able to answer that.
Yeah.
I'm happy to get response before Tuesday.
Yeah, no,
That's
we
fine.
will get the response before Tuesday. Thanks.
I guess the other thing is that there's no real discussion in that response that that kind of talks about our own central city parking strategy. So my understanding is that we've made a call as a council not to provide public car parking buildings through that strategy.
Like, I think that is actually in the report. And one of the clear things is that you don't want to see further off-street car parks except for those already committed to at Parakiori and associated with the Performing Arts Precinct. So that was your policy from 2021. So this is consistent with that policy, but reflects that we're on the cusp of a change and we want to see more mode shift, but you've recognised that there is still demand that needs to be met, and this is, with Parakiori, the last of the off-street car parks that council will build in the central city.
Right, sure, get that. I guess what I'm interested in is if we choose not to sell the land to Wilson's, and there's still a requirement that we have to build a car park in this space, does our policy preclude us from doing it as a council, or can we still do it, but we just note an exception to our policy?
No, you can still do it, but you would need to make that as a separate decision that you want to go that way, because that's not the decision that you have on the books at the moment. Okay. And you would need to consider that within your financial situation and whether you've got the capital available to do that.
Sure. And one of the other submitters raised other locations is obviously with Otakaro, they're doing the Fletchers, and the other developers are doing the Eastern Frame. There was also mention of opposite the town hall. So when it comes back, are we able to get a sense of other alternative locations where we might be able to have a car park if that was the direction we went?
Yeah, I think we can probably answer that today. I'll start with the car park opposite the town hall. That land has been sold by DCL through to developers for residential development and mixed-use development, and our strong position, or the strong position that was put in that, was it was not to be used for a car park in the long term. So that site's out. We can certainly talk to Otakaro to see if there are unsold sites in the central city, but I believe that there is been a significant demand for residential, which has accelerated the release of some of that land for residential, including changes to some of the contracts in there. So I don't believe that's a viable option as well. Tim, are you aware of any other sites?
No, I mean, when we went to market the first time, we looked for potential sites for the original expression of interest, very close to the Performing Arts Precinct. So we pretty much drew the line at the river. We were interested in sites between effectively Madras Street, Durham Street, and sort of south to Cathedral Square. The sites that really presented themselves were those that have been mentioned this afternoon, and that is the potential site obviously north of Armagh Street, and then the former Ridges Hotel parking building there. No others, from my recollection, surfaced around that time of expression of interest, and obviously because of the locality of the desire of a parking building being close to those theatre venues, the convention centre and Taronga, and in terms of the facilities it's delivering in terms of mobility parking and so on and so forth. So that's why we've really landed on something pretty close to the Performing Arts Precinct being the best location.
Okay. Yeah, I just think it would be good when we come to Tuesday to have maybe a one-pager of why those alternatives are not feasible. Also, I don't recall us making a decision to have no car parking opposite the town hall. In fact, my recollection is that there was feedback given when we saw some of the plans that there was going to be a need for car parking in that area. So, but if we could just get that clarified before Tuesday, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Tim and Sarah.
Thank you. 3 quick ones. First of all, I've got a whole raft of questions which I'd like to send in tomorrow once I've got my head around them. So, Dawn, do I send them through the office of the CE? Thank you. Second question, the Court Theatre car park, where Ravenscar House is now, my memory, and Bruce, you could just double check for in the future, it wasn't the Court Theatre car park, it was the Arts Centre car park, and that serviced the Ducks Deluxe, the physics room, which had a number of different guises over the years, Annie's Wine Bar and the Great Hall. So it actually serviced the Arts Centre. There were
in the museum
leased car parks, and the museum, yeah. So there were leased car parks, and some of them were leased from the Arts Centre, from the Court Theatre. But could we actually know exactly how many free car parks for use of the public?
Yeah, I can answer that now.
We're going to get that.
Yeah, well, the information's come through while we've been here. So the total car parks there were 82, 27 of them were casual, and 55 were leased. So I will put that into the omnibus response as well.
Great, thank you. And the final one, Dawn, when we have a 2-stage decision, and it's happened before, and I can't remember off my head, but I do remember getting kind of annoyed, is when we have a 2-stage decision like this, where we've made the first decision, but it can fall over because of things changing and information coming up, and then we get, there could be legal risk, etc. I think that's got to be made really clear to all councillors at the very start of the first decision. And I don't think this was, I certainly know, and I can't remember what the earlier one was, I've been here for so long, but I do remember the first time it happened, I was quite surprised. So if we can just take a note of that and make that really clear for the future.
Completely agree with you, Tim. In fact, I prefer not to have 2-stage decisions of this nature. It's quite unusual in my experience.
Yeah.
And it's dragged on for years and years and years.
Yep.
I think that what's happened,
we had this debate at the time.
Well, hang on. There were 2 things that happened. One was the intervention of COVID. We had a deal. We struck a deal. We had an agreement, and then that fell over. We went back out to market, and I guess what I missed along the way, that somebody would interpret that the definition of a park would include land that had been gifted to us as part of the Performing Arts Precinct just because we owned it. So it just seemed to me that we ended up in a consultation on land use separate. So I agree with you, Tim, it should not happen again. So we should be alert to it from the get-go. We didn't consult originally. Well, we didn't go out to market originally with sale in mind. But the alternatives, and I won't go into the alternative offers that we had because they would be, I guess, interesting, and we didn't accept them for some reasons. So we've got to go through all of this, and that's why I'm thinking that we want some lessons learned as well, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for raising it.
Yeah. Can I just comment on one of your points there, Madam Mayor? We have put up on the website a summary that doesn't identify anyone and doesn't provide any commercial and confidence information about the 4 submissions that we received, so that the public can see the types of things that you had to consider, but without giving away any commercial information or any identifying information.
Oh, well, I think I've missed that. So it might be quite good to sort of add that to the agenda for the meeting, so that people can actually, turn their mind and attention to that. Because I mean, we had other options in front of us, and this was in a different category. So, thank you, Tim. There's really good questions. Sarah.
Thanks. 2 quick things actually. My first point was going to be on the that exact risk thing. So I think one of the other ones was the decision to grant money for the cathedral, and that was it was an agreement we made with an outside organisation ahead of public consultation and subject to. So I think we need to just look at whether we do enter agreements with third parties subject to anything, or whether we consult first before we enter agreements in the future, and getting some advice on that would be good. The other one is kind of related to the numbers of car parks and things, and just an idea of the numbers of patrons at the old Court Theatre and the seating there, and the numbers at the new Court Theatre. So when we're looking at the old and new car parking and stuff, we've got an idea of how many they had attending each night as well.
Yeah.
That would be good.
I don't have those figures myself, but Peter McGibbon is online.
For
Peter,
Tuesday would be fine.
do you have that?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I don't have them at hand, but yeah, we could get them for Tuesday.
That's fine. Yep, that'd be great. Thanks.
All right, and I think that's all of the questions. So that's quite a lot to be going on with. So my question is that would it be better to start the meeting at 10 o'clock? I'm getting a nod from staff, so I think at this point I shall adjourn the meeting until 10 o'clock on Tuesday, the 15th of March. So thank you very much for all of the work today, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday. And thanks everyone very much. Thank you.
Kia ora.
See you.
Thank you. See ya.